A man stands near a nuclear accident site. He feels fine, no pain, no blood, no burns, so he goes home. A few days later, his skin starts peeling off. Inside his body, his bone marrow has already stopped working, and by the time he realizes something is wrong, it's already too late. That's radiation. You don't feel it, you don't always see it, but it quietly destroys you from the inside. Today, we're going down an iceberg of real nuclear disasters and focusing on the strangest, most disturbing effects radiation has ever caused in human history. Let's start at the surface. Tier 1. The Bikini Atoll nuclear tests. Fun fact, if the name Bikini Atoll sounds familiar, well, it's because it is. So technically, SpongeBob is living under a real-world nuclear test site. Anyways, the United States tested nuclear bombs on Bikini Atoll in the 1940s and 50s. Entire islands were evacuated so bombs could be detonated in the ocean and sky. But the explosion wasn't the real danger. After the blast, invisible radioactive dust spread everywhere. It didn't just disappear, it sank into soil, drifted through air, entered fish and ocean water. So even food became dangerous. The shocking part is that the islands still look beautiful today, but parts of the ground are still technically contaminated decades later. Chernobyl. In 1986, a nuclear reactor exploded in Ukraine. Firefighters rushed in thinking it was just a fire. It wasn't. At first, most felt nothing unusual. Then came a metallic taste in the mouth, dizziness and nausea, extreme weakness, confusion. Radiation destroyed their bone marrow and it caused their immune system to collapse. Internal bleeding and skin damage that appeared days later. Fukushima. In 2011, a tsunami hit a nuclear power plant in Japan. Reactors overheated and released radiation. And if it wasn't for a nuclear engineer called Masao Yoshida, who defied orders from the management to stop injecting seawater into the overheating reactors, the outcome of this disaster could have been way worse. Unlike Chernobyl, most people didn't suffer immediate physical effects. Instead, it caused massive evacuation stress and psychological trauma. People who were not even exposed still developed stress symptoms just from fear of contamination. In this case, radiation's biggest effect wasn't physical. It was mental. Kysthym disaster. In 1957, in the Soviet Union, a nuclear waste tank exploded and the government kept it secret for years. The worst part is people living nearby didn't know anything happened. So they continued as normal, drinking the local water, eating local food, and lived normal lives. But radiation was slowly entering their bodies. Over time, they developed chronic illnesses, fatigue, and cancer. There was a massive health decline, and it went unexplained for years. Finally, in 1976, exiled Soviet biologist Joris Medvedev exposed the incident in the journal New Scientist. However, the Soviets did not acknowledge the accidents until 1989. Tier 3. The Shadow People of Hiroshima. After the atomic bomb hit Hiroshima, something strange was left behind. The explosion released extreme heat and light instantly. Where a person stood, their body acted as a shield protecting the surface behind them from the energy of the explosion. Everything around them burned or bleached except their outline. What was left behind were human-shaped shadows burned into stone. Those who survived experienced common effects of radiation exposure such as long-term cancer risks, but also a sudden blindness from the flash of the bomb and severe burns. Some survivors reported memory gaps. Not just trauma, but difficulty remembering events clearly after the blast. It wasn't just emotional shock, it was biological damage to the brain. Tier 4. Goiania, Brazil. The glowing blue powder. On September 13, 1987, two scavengers, Roberto dos Santos Alves and Wagner Pereira, broke into an institute, looking for scrap metal and anything else they could sell. What they discovered changed Brazil's radiological safety laws forever. They found the radiotherapy machine, which had text and warning symbols on it they didn't understand. They dismantled part of the machine and removed a valuable-looking stainless steel canister, which they brought back to Alva's home nearby. Inside was a glowing blue substance. They just thought it looked cool and shared it with their family and friends, allowing their kids to play with it, but little did they know it was cesium-137, a radioactive substance that left traces on their body and clothing. It spread and contaminated multiple families. At first, there were no symptoms or warnings, but it didn't take long till burns started appearing on their skin. They began vomiting and started swelling up due to radiation poisoning, but they assumed the illness was from something they ate. More than 100,000 people were screened, and 249 showed severe signs of contamination. Unfortunately, 4 people died, and whole city sections were decontaminated, and multiple contaminated homes were demolished. Tier 5. The Demon Core. The Demon Core was a small plutonium sphere created during the Manhattan Project, originally meant for another atomic bomb. After World War II, scientists used it for experiments to see how close it could get to starting a nuclear chain reaction. The problem was that it was already extremely unstable, so even a small mistake could make it go critical and release a burst of deadly radiation. In 1945, physicist Harry Daghlian accidentally dropped a block during an experiment, causing a sudden radiation spike marked by a brief blue flash. He quickly fixed it, but had already received a fatal dose and died weeks later. Then, in 1946, Louis Slotin made a similar mistake while demonstrating the experiment using a screwdriver to hold the setup in place. It slipped, triggering another radiation burst. He managed to stop it, saving others in the room, but died days later from radiation sickness. What made the demon core so dangerous was how fast and invisible it was. No explosion, no noise, just a flash of radiation strong enough to kill within days. Across all these events, one thing becomes clear. Radiation is not just an explosion effect, it's invisible. It spreads silently, and it destroys the body from the inside while everything still looks normal on the outside. And that's what makes it so terrifying.